points, I'd really like to appreciate the Kenya Private Sector Association, which was one of the organizations that kickstarted such conversations. Particularly, really special thanks to you, Madam Carol Karuga. So we only have 30 minutes for this session, and my name is Lillian Kierie. I'm handling business advocacy for the East African Business Council. And with the 30 minutes, I'll start off by just going through our program. As you can see on your screens, we start with the ground rules as Madam gets ready. So we expect you to mute your microphone when you're speaking, to switch off your video when you're not speaking, to respect the panelists' views, to contribute to the meeting's goals, to stay on point and on time, and to focus on the topic. And all the questions you have can be sent to the chat room and also through our Twitter pages. Kindly note that this meeting will be recorded for reporting purposes. So on next is the program, and we're going to kick off by welcoming the EABC CEO, Dr. Peter Mathuki. And then next, we are going to have a short presentation from Ambassador Amina Mohamed. Then thereafter, we are going to have the chairman of EABC, Mr. Nick Nesbitt, who is going to just share his comments and also kick off the Q&A session. And then after that, we're going to just have the deliberations, a few people asking questions. We have questions from Rwanda, Tanzania, Uganda, and even some people from the diaspora. And then after that, we're going to close off the session, and that is going to be done by our CEO again, Bwana Peter Mathuki. So importantly to note is that the African continent remains of great importance to the World Trade Organization. This is noting that from the 164 countries which are members of WTO, 44 of them are from Africa. And from the 44 of them which are from Africa, it is very special this year to note that we have 8 contestants. And from these 8 contestants, we have 3 from Africa. From the 3 from Africa, we have 3 who are women. And among them, we're very privileged to have Amina Mohamed joining us. So I will just let the CEO kick off the session, and he can start by sharing his remarks. To you, Bwana CEO.
Thank you very much, Lillian. I hope I'm audible, and good afternoon, everyone. Karibu sana, Waziri. I hope I'm audible. Greetings from Arusha.
Yes, you're audible, yes.
Thank you very much, and for creating time to join. This is a platform for private sector in East Africa. All the people you will see on board are from all the partner states of the EAC. So, as Lillian said, wanted to confirm that EABC had given that endorsement to your candidature. And obviously, as we all know, that you are the second phase and most critical phase of your selection process. And we hope that, of course, you'll be getting it. And of course, to us as private sector in East Africa, we feel that this is an important position for us as private sector and coming to one of us from East Africa. And given, of course, the reform agenda within WTO, we know that you will carry the agenda of private sector strongly as you do for the stakeholders within this. But also we feel that the voice of African private sector, and particularly this part of the properly add, and of course making reference again to the, remember the boosting the intra-Africa trade action plan, which was adopted by the heads of state in 2012. And it is a useful framework that brings together priority concerns, which are related to intra-regional trade and trade policy, trade facilitation, production, and of course, key to us as private sector. And now, in the coming in of SCFT at a time like this. So it's our prayer that
Bwana CEO, you're breaking off.
Get with you and give that assurance. Yeah. I'm not very sure I'm still audible, the network issues here. But what I'm saying is that the private sector in East Africa is meeting you this afternoon to engage with you and reassure you of their support to your candidature. Waziri, and yes, of course, I hope again after all this and you get to be able to meet the private sector. So I think without further ado, I know, of course, we have Chair Dennis Carrera, who was to at some point get out, but I would want to give you this opportunity, Waziri, so that quickly you just speak for them to hear for a few minutes, and of course you get 2 Q&A questions, and of course you respond, aware that of course you have other engagement after this. So over to you, Waziri.
Well, thank you very much, Peter, and let me just thank the chairman and all of you who are joining us for this meeting. I hope that you can hear me, because when Peter, when you were talking, it was intermittent. You came in and out. So I hope that you can hear me. But let me just say that I'm grateful for the invitation to interact with the East African community's private sector. I interacted with the EAC and the private sector during the periods that we worked together on international trade, but also on other issues. And I actually saw the determination that the private sector in our part of the world had, to use trade as a tool for sustainable growth and development of our region. And I think that it's no secret that amongst the RECs on the continent, the East African community is among the most dynamic. And this is partly due to the extraordinary efforts of the private sector in the East African region. And as you know, although trade rules are negotiated by member states, by government, it's the private sector that uses them to expand trade and investment. And therefore, a dynamic East African community with an active private sector will ensure that the region benefits significantly from the world trade system, but also from the AfCFTA. And the reason why East Africa will gain from the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is because the intention of the AfCFTA would be to reduce transaction costs in doing business, simplifying customs procedures, harmonizing trade rules among the signatory countries. And I think that we are all clear about the expectation that the population of the continent will double in a few decades, and that it would have a growing middle class whose purchasing power will continue to fuel demand for goods and services. At the moment, and this is no secret to you because you are the sector that does trade every single day and maybe every hour of every day, the intra-African trade stands at only 15%. And if that's compared to other areas, the EU has 65%. Others have 50%, and others have a little bit less than that. According to the UN Economic Commission for Africa, if we just eliminated the current overall average tariff of 6.1, we would actually double, without doing anything else, we would double intra-Africa trade among African countries from 15 to 30%. If we removed the tariffs and also eliminated non-tariff barriers, I don't even want to tell you what they're predicting. The intra-Africa trade will just go through the roof. And it's estimated by the World Bank that the AfCFTA will actually boost Africa's exports by $560 billion and add 450 billion to its income by 2035. So we're talking huge figures here. We're also talking about lifting 30 million Africans out of absolute poverty and facilitating their greater participation in Africa's economy. But for the EAC and for the AfCFTA, to actually achieve their full potential, there is need for a vibrant multilateral trading system, especially considering that currently 85% of Africa's trade is actually with the rest of the world. Regrettably, of course, and I'm going to try and be very, very brief, the WTO has been paralyzed for some time now. Its negotiating function has yielded very few results since 1995 when it was created. and has only managed to conclude 3 major agreements: the Trade Facilitation Agreement in Bali, the Export Competition Decision that was taken in Nairobi, and the revamped Information Technology Agreement that was also negotiated and concluded in Nairobi, where I had the honor and privilege of chairing the ministerial conference. And so if I was selected, I would be a strong advocate for an open trading system. And I think that that is no secret because I have done that half of my professional life. I would also be a leader in reforming the system. And I believe very strongly that I actually have the necessary knowledge and the proven skills to turn the WTO around. You have spoken to the need for reforms within the WTO, and I would agree with you very strongly because we want the WTO to remain an engine for economic growth, for development, and for stability. We also want the WTO to help create the conditions for a sustainable recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think that it's also no secret that reviving trade is actually essential to recovery from the pandemic worldwide, to boosting growth in our countries, and to achieving sustainable development, to easing the social and economic impact of the crisis. I think that once we start recovering, then we still need to update the trading system and to update its rules. And you've, I think, talked to that, Peter, about the need to actually extend the rule book to new areas, expand it, and also upgrade it, so that we are covering areas like the digitization of the global economy, areas like climate change and sustainable development, but other areas as well. I think that we already have, rules on competition policy, for instance, in the region as well as in our countries. So I think that that would also not be a bad area to invest in, as well as in facilitation of investment, which is an ongoing plurilateral negotiation at the WTO. And we, of course, need to relearn how to negotiate and start negotiating multilateral agreements again. We haven't done that for a while. Let me end by just saying that as if I was selected, I would be a consensus builder. I would make sure that we reform the organization. I would make sure that we used it for recovery from the pandemic. Also that that at the end of the day, we renewed it so that its benefits can be felt by all of us. It's a member-driven organization. It's a member-driven organization. So as DG, your role would be obviously to provide a strategic vision for the organization, but also to convene members, to encourage them to engage, and to encourage them to work on multilateral rules, and also to ensure the values of the WTO are maintained, the values of transparency, of non-discrimination, and of inclusiveness. The WTO becomes totally fair and equitable. Chairman Peter, thank you very, very much for your attention.
Amina, and we are very happy to hear you talking about being a consensus builder. Particularly, we are very happy because you've been an indeed strong advocate for open trading system. At this juncture, I'd like to call upon Mr. Nicholas Nesbitt, who is the chairman of EABC, to give his remarks and also to open the question and answer session.
Thank you very much, and good to see you, Ambassador Amina. And it looks like you're still in the seat. Is that in Nairobi? Are you in Nairobi right now?
Oh, Chairman, I am in Geneva.
Oh, you're in Geneva. Good. I'd also like to. There's an echo. Can you hear an echo?
I can hear you.
No, there's an echo coming. I don't know if, anyway. I would also like to recognize the presence of our two friends, Ambassador Dan Kazungu and Ambassador Dr. Cleopa Mailu. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. And we're all in this together. And we're really encouraged as EABC to see the attendance of this large group of people here this afternoon to listen to what you have to say, Amina, and also to have a very good and clear, frank discussion. So I'm not the important person to listen to. It's to the people who have the questions and you who have the answers. But I think one of the questions that came across my desk as we were getting started here was perhaps if you could kick off and talk about your vision of what trade will look like in 2030, especially from a technical standpoint. You're getting a much greater focus on digitization and blockchain and e-trading platforms and so on and so forth. So what's it going to look like in this new world order, and how are you going to make the reality of the needs of people match the policies? I don't know if I was clear.
Oh, thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, it was very clear. Let me also just recognize my colleagues, Dan Kazungu and Ambassador Mailu as well, and thank Ambassador, in fact, High Commissioner Dan Kazungu for joining in. Ambassador Mailu has been with me in Geneva and has been very, very supportive. So trade in 2030, I'm hoping that with the coming into play of the AFCFTA, the trade on the continent will look entirely different. As I said before, the average tariff is 6.1. If we got rid of that, we would double trade within the continent within a very short time. If we were actually able to get rid of the non-tariff barriers as well, would probably go beyond what the EU has of 65%. I mean, I have no doubt in my mind. We'll probably be also completely connected. Right now, Chairman, as you know, we are disconnected. We don't have the infrastructure that's required to connect all the countries on the continent. And I think that by that time, we would start to see infrastructure development take off and countries getting connected to each other. That would be in the next 10 years. And I think that one of the objectives of having the secretariat already in place in Ghana with an office block is to make sure that the new Secretary General actually hits the ground running and starts focusing on the needs to develop modalities for driving intra-Africa trade. In terms of what the focus would be, look, I think that digital trade. I think that would be one of the priorities for not just for the region, but for it's a global priority. At the WTO, we have the plurilateral negotiations on e-commerce. I think my biggest regret is that it has not attracted many Africans. I think there are just a few Africans that have joined in those plurilateral negotiations, and hopefully if we get an African at the helm of the WTO, that would probably change, because then there would be a lot more encouragement of Africans to join the plurilateral negotiations, both on the digital economy, but also on investment facilitation, because in investment facilitation, in fact, probably there's no African that's participating, and that's a real shame. I think that we need to be in there to make sure that our needs are also reflected in the rules that are being developed, and that we carve out space for special and differential treatment and for flexibilities to be included, so that we don't have to take on the same level of commitment as developed countries. So I think that it would look entirely different. I think the pandemic has already changed quite a lot. Now we are doing a lot more on e-platforms. We'll also be talking much more about carbon taxes. Right now, the WTO allows countries to levy carbon taxes, selectively, if a country decides that they're going to import either green, equipment or green products. You're allowed to actually impose, carbon tax, so that you can gradually start moving to that space. I think that you'll see much more of that. You'll see much more of that. I think we'll also see a new agreement on technology. The information technology agreement that we have, I think, will also be upgraded so that it takes into account new developments that are taking place on a day-to-day basis. So really, that's what I think it will look like. And my expectation, my hope, is that Africa will be at the core of the multilateral trading system, that with its own agreement, it will be the one place that everybody will want to be trading with and participating in the development of. So that's what I would say, Chairman, to just how it will, Africa and of course the globe will look in terms of the multilateral trading system and what we really need to focus on. We need to focus on capacity building, definitely on training our negotiators, our experts, our lawyers, so that we can start using the dispute settlement mechanism to protect our rights and to make sure that others meet their commitments that they have made to us.
Set of
So I'm really going to have to get on ED Peter Mathuki's case. Can everybody mute their microphones, please? I'm going to have to get on Mathuki's case, Peter. There, you only gave Ambassador 30 minutes this afternoon, and getting her to paint her vision in 4 minutes or less is a very short time. At this juncture, let me invite some questions from the audience. We would request that anybody asking a question, please make it very brief and succinct, and that way we can get more questions in. First question.
Thank you very much, Chairman Nesbitt. Now we're going to be having questions, particularly from all the regions in East Africa. We're going to be having a question from Rwanda. We're also going to be having one from Tanzania and another from Uganda. Diaspora.
We can't hear you.
You're breaking.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. In the last few minutes, a lot of people have joined from the EAC private sector. So we'd like to just reiterate that we're having a conversation on deepening relations between the East Africa Community private sector and the WTO candidate. And the WTO, we're having Amina Mohamed. Ambassador Amina Mohamed is one of the candidates who is contesting for the position of Director General at the WTO. I'm going to be welcoming from Rwanda, going to be talking to our chairman, Janice. You have a question, kindly?
Thank you. Yes, thank you, moderator. Ambassador, can you hear me? Honorable Amina, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I had muted. Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you very much. Let me say, first of all, Honorable, I'm honored and quite pleasure to see you today and interact with you on this platform. From Rwanda, greetings from Rwanda, and lots of well wishes from Rwanda. You definitely have our support, and not just Rwanda, but they have the support of the region. So from the Rwanda position and from a personal point, we wish to give you our full backing and our full support, and we pray that you get through this contest. As you come in, there are two things, just to refresh your mind on this one. I am the focal point for EABC on matters of ACFTA. Now, the key things I'm looking at that are likely going to be critical or of high priority as you position yourself is how are you looking at positioning the continental, this whole chapter of ACFTA, continental trading, considering that you are coming at a time when two major world powers are at serious loggerheads with serious trade wars between Asia, China particularly, and USA. Knowing that when two elephants fight, the grass usually suffers. Likelihood is that with the US and China at war, the grass is likely going to be Africa. And so we need to be protected from suffering the effects of the war going between the two giants. How are we going to be looking at that? My question or my appeal would be, are you looking at positioning Africa just that it does not become the grass when these two giants keep up the fight? And then the whole issue of, combined with that is the whole issue of the protectionism that we see happening on the continent and outside the continent, each country struggling to maintain its own arrangements and of course wanting to have a role or a part in the world trade framework. How are we going to overcome this issue of protectionism? And finally, the key role that WTO is going to play under your leadership, if you come in, to get the secretariat of the CFTA into actual engagement with the blocks with your facilitation. Thank you, Excellency, and I'm pleased also to say hello to the other excellencies I've had around the group.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you. Can I respond to those first?
Yes, sure.
Okay, absolutely. So I'll begin with what we should do. Two elephants fighting, the green, the grass really suffers. Everybody's worried about that, not just Africa, by the way. Countries that are closer to the US, the Latin Americans are worried. Countries that are closer to China and Asia also worried. And I think that, and that's the argumentation that I've made. If it's a trade dispute, it has to be solved within the framework of the WTO. I mean, there's absolutely no question in my mind about it. If it's an issue of rules not existing, like, there are questions now about data flows, for instance. I think you probably know that, and there are quarrels about disputes about data flow. So if it's a trade issue, it has to be solved within the WTO. If the trade rules are weak, we need to negotiate stronger rules. If they're absent, like in digital trade with the data flows, then we really need to focus on creating the rules to address those. But I'll tell you that there's a lot of effort on the part of members of the WTO to see these two sides come together and actually have a dialogue. And what they're waiting for is to have a director general who can then convene members to meetings, who can engage members, who can probably do some shuttle diplomacy between the two, big players in the multilateral trading system. These are countries that have benefited a lot from the trading system. One of them lifted over 350 million people out of poverty in 10 years. Yeah, and so they know what the benefits of trade are. They are committed to the multilateral trading system, and I think that the expectation and the hope is that in the near future, when some of the political questions have been taken out of the equation, that they would come back to the WTO and solve their dispute. And I'll tell you this also, that there have been tensions within the multilateral trading system before, that US and Japan, for instance, they were resolved in this building that I'm currently seated in, and where the mission, the Kenya mission has offices. That's where the USTR used to sit before. And those tensions were resolved through the same thing, through engagement, through bringing the parties together, through the Director General then acting as an honest broker, a bridge builder, doing the research and putting papers on the table, listening to them and pulling threads together of commonality. And of course, the insistence that the trading system is important for all of us, that it cannot exist without these bigger players. It also is totally useful for all of us, and that for us, we actually aspire to use this system to our benefit, and we have been discouraging them from ruining the system because we need this system, the multilateral trading system. And so I have no fear. I have no fear that the tensions will go beyond where they're at, and that they will completely destroy the multilateral trading system. I don't have that fear. I think that we will continue to see the posturing, between these two players, but that at some point they will come together, because they are the biggest beneficiaries and they are the biggest players. And there's absolutely no way that any of them can do without the rules-based multilateral trading system. They need the rules. They need the rules to manage their trading relations. And so they will insist on having this resolved within the multilateral trading system. And so I don't have much fear in that regard. What I would do is encourage all of us on the continent to really focus on the African free trade agreement, and on creating our free trade area, making it as effective and efficient as possible. Because as I said before, if we're able to get rid of the 6.1% average tariffs that we levy on goods, we'll double intra-Africa trade from 15% to 30%. Already, if you do that, you rely 15% less on trade with other regions. Yeah. So you're already beginning to actually define your own destiny. And when you do that, people come calling, and everybody wants to trade with you. So I think that if we just used all the energies we have, invested in making sure that our own free trade area actually takes off, for us, then we won't suffer as much when elephants fight. Then we will also be our own giant, and they will have to reckon with the giant. On protectionism, the WTO has a very big role to play to ensure that protectionism actually comes down, that trade barriers are reduced, and that tariffs are also reduced. And so that's actually the core business of the multilateral trading system, is to liberalize trade, to open markets, to make sure that all these barriers are brought down, and that everybody is able to benefit from the movement of goods and services across borders. And so there's a transparency pillar in the WTO within the trade policy review body. It's been quite effective actually in just telling countries that and discouraging them from using trade barriers as a way of protecting their markets. And that information is always out there, so you know what trade policy measures what countries have put in place and for how long those policies will last, so that you can, of course, also plan your own trade policies. On capacity building within the Secretariat, I think for me that's a priority. It's a priority for WTO to support the Secretariat of the African Free Trade Area. And I think that if I was selected, that would be a real focus for me, because we constructed our agreement on the WTO's foundation. And so it would not be a difficult thing to get WTO, even staff, come and support the fully, functionality of the Secretariat, of our Secretariat. So for me, that would be a real priority. That's one way that I would contribute most directly to ensuring that the agreement actually takes off and supports our growth. Thank you.
Thank you very, very, very much on that.
I'd like to use this opportunity to recognize the presence of Manu Chandaria, who is one of the founding chairpersons of the East African Business Council. We are short of time, and I'd like to give this opportunity to just two more questions. We're going to have Tanzania and Uganda real quick. We should be wrapping up in the next 5 minutes. So from Tanzania, this is your platform to ask a question from Tanzania.
I can't hear.
Tanzania or Uganda? Tanzania or Uganda, you had expressed interest in asking a question on this forum.
I'm Davis from Uganda. There's a small inquiry that I'd like to ask. It's about like the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and how is it going to help, especially in easing trade in terms of air transport. We've noticed that in Africa we have a huge gap in the air transport kind of system. So I don't know how like when we put you there, how you'll help us ease those gaps in between the air spaces in terms of freight charges, as well as having access to airports, different types of airports. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. My brother from Tanzania, the WTO deals with the services trade. we haven't really gotten to a place where we are talking about air services. But on the continent, of course, you have the Yamoussoukro, arrangement, and I think we haven't taken as much benefit of that arrangement that was negotiated by our leaders actually a while back. I think that if we took advantage fully of that, you would actually see an easing of the challenges that we face as a continent with air travel. And as far as the AFCFTA is concerned, I think as soon as the AFCFTA takes off, you will see that there will be a focus on infrastructure development and on connectivity, across our continent. And I think that would probably be the place where, with the support of the WTO, with the support of all governments on the continent, we can seriously begin to address, the shortcomings that we have in air transport. But in the WTO, I actually brought it up. I raised it many years ago, and it wasn't something that was picked up. I was worried, as you are now, of the cost of air travel, and especially the discrepancy between air travel from Europe to Africa and Europe to the US, and the differences in the cost of travel, yet the distances were equidistant. They were, almost the same distances that we're traveling, and yet we were paying maybe twice as much as those that were traveling from Europe to the US. I brought that up. It wasn't taken up. It's maybe something that I can also, take up if I get selected. But I think it's also an issue that the continent really has to pay attention to. If we're able to do this within the continent, it will be picked up elsewhere, and everybody else will fall into place. If we're not able to do it within our continent ourselves, it's very difficult to get others to do it. So we will have to do the heavy lifting. We'll have to pull our socks up and deal with it, because it's really a problem that very, very directly affects ourselves. It affects our people. It affects the movement of goods and services within our continent. Let me also recognize a very, very dear friend of mine. I'm sorry I can't see him, but I'll definitely look for him when I go back to Nairobi. Manu Chandaria, it's very nice to know that you're here.
When Chandaria looks like he wants to say a word.
Just wanted to say thank you very much. I've listened to quite a bit. I think that what we require, that we cannot run our countries or Africa on its own. We have to be a part of a larger organization, and we should be a partnership with as many people as we can. And I'm sure that my friend Amina, if he becomes a WTO, well, we will see a change for Africa. Bravo.
It's okay.
If I may,
thank you very much. Madam Mondosha from Tanzania is going to conclude this Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Lillian. And Ambassador, based on our views from the private sector, it has been seen that the WTO has a very limited role in helping some of the global issues related to food security, climate change, and also global trade imbalances. And this also has an effect on East Africa. So what is your strategy in this regard? Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much. Look, international trade actually has been a key component in guaranteeing food security of many of our countries. And it's through trade that we're able to move food from surplus areas to deficit areas. To level the playing field, we agreed at the WTO in December of 2015, when I was in the chair of the conference, the WTO conference, to eliminate all forms of export subsidies on agricultural products. And what that did immediately, is actually stop dumping of cheap products on in our markets, so that our farmers had a fighting chance. They could actually compete in our own domestic and regional markets, which was not the case before, because very cheap goods were being dumped, and therefore there was no incentive for our farmers to produce, food, and that just the prohibition of export subsidies contributed immensely. It really did to the efforts of countries to fulfill the SDG 2 on zero hunger. And I don't have the figures now. I don't have the statistics now. I actually had them a week ago because I was talking about food security on the continent and the contribution of the agreement, of the Nairobi Agreement, to that. But I don't have that, with me now. But I'll tell you this: that the trading system, because it's a rules-based system, creates actually a level playing field. But also within those rules, we have carved out special and differential treatment for our countries. For the LDCs, there's the duty-free, quota-free access to markets across the world. And we negotiated that here in Geneva. It's through the multilateral system that was actually negotiated, and then countries were allowed to do that through a waiver that we got in Doha in 2001, and that we have ever since Doha been renewing at the WTO at every ministerial meeting, because we really believe that the benefits of trade have to be equitably shared across the world, and that there are countries that do not have the capacity to trade effectively without support, and therefore the whole idea of duty-free, quota-free, the whole idea of aid for trade, and creating programs within the WTO that will be supportive to countries, and supportive in areas that countries themselves would identify. If you wanted support in agriculture, you got it in agriculture. If it was in manufacturing, the same happened. For LDCs again, and the majority of LDCs are on the continent, we actually had the integrated framework that was additional to the aid for trade. Without the multilateral trading system, we would not get all that support. We would also today not have even everything but arms, for many of the countries on the continent. But it's through the waivers that we have worked for within the system, that those systems, those arrangements, those concessions have been provided, including AGOA, because we actually had to negotiate for a waiver from the rules to put AGOA in place. So the multilateral trading system has been extremely useful in supporting our development, in just supporting our growth, but also in supporting us get integrated into the multilateral trading system. And that's why today, as we speak, there are 9 African countries that have lined up to join the WTO, to accede to the WTO.
My inbox is literally filled with a lot of comments, and our socials are actually smoking with a lot of questions for you. But respectfully, we understand that you're jumping into another meeting. So I'd like to call upon the CEO of EABC, Bwana Mathuki, to just conclude. I'd also like to appreciate the over 80 of you who've joined for this session. So kindly, Bwana Mathuki, you can make the final remarks as you conclude, and also just give your final remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lillian, and thank you very much, Ambassador Amina, for your eloquence. And this basically was a platform for you to interact with the private sector in East Africa. Remember, you started off with KEPSA a while ago. Sister Caro was also critical in assisting in supporting this. Of course, we are the chair. We are the captains of industry with us. We have also diaspora with us, actually. Diaspora from the US was in the meeting, and our diaspora also from Japan was in the meeting. And I can attest to you that we all are from private sector from this region. We associate ourselves with you, and we wish you well as you go to the next phase of this process. It is our hope that you will be the WTO Director General very soon. So thank you very much, and wish you all the best, and good afternoon.
Thank you very, very much. I'm delighted that I was able to interact, and I need your prayers and your blessings as we continue with the journey towards the end of this process. I hope that we actually get a chance for an African to lead the organization. It's going to be the first time that an African has led the WTO, and so it would be historical. There are 3 of us that are running for the position, and we have resolved as Africa to support all our 3 candidates as we go through the round. So thank you very, very much for the opportunity to have this discussion. I want to promise, Peter, that if I get selected, that I would come for a much longer session with all of you, where I'll be asking for advice. I'll actually sit down and just listen to advice from all of you. You tell me where you think we should take the organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and all the best. Wish you well. Thank you, Chairman Nick, for coordinating this, and board members for accepting to engage with the Ambassador Amina Mohamed. All the best, and wish you well.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Amina. All the very best.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. We're going to be ending this session. Thank you, everybody. Apologies to all.